Alright, so I released the video of my 10 worst NASCAR Cup Series races of the 2010s, so it's only fitting that I go to the positive side now and do my 10 best NASCAR races of the 2010s instead. So, watching through these 2010 to 2019 races, you do realize that, like, oh, there's actually some really, really good races. And there are some races where maybe people wouldn't necessarily think that they are a top 10 race, but it ends up being a top 10 race. So what I normally look for in a NASCAR race is seeing cars hard to drive, low grip, the tires wearing over a long run. I'd rather see longer runs than a bunch of caution flags. So I'd rather see, some green flag pit stops in the race, stuff like that. And obviously a bonus onto it to make it a really, really good race would be battling throughout the race, right? It could have all that stuff, hard to drive cars, high tire wear, long green flag runs. But if there's not really any good racing or passing during it, then it's not going to be considered a good race. So the ability to pass has to be there as well, and I think that these 10 races really do kind of emphasize all those points and really, really get into it. I think that these are definitely some of the 10 best races of the 2010s, and I think that maybe all 10 of these people could agree on and say, yeah, those were good races. They definitely deserve to be there. So without further ado, here are my 10 best NASCAR Cup Series races of the 2010s.
The Bass Pro Shops NRA Night Race is underway.
The 2018 Bass Pro Shops NRA Night Race is one of the most underrated Bristol Night races ever, and definitely the best Bristol Night race in recent memory in my opinion. And it all started really early on in the race with the massive crash involving one of the race's favorites to win, Kyle Busch. And then, after that happened, at the head of the pack, there was still great racing early on. And it all came down to the end of stage one with a very, very close battle for the stage one. It was actually a photo finish with Ryan Blaney getting it by just a few 1,000ths of a second. And then another close battle actually ended stage two between Joey Logano and Chase Elliott, with Logano coming on top in that one. And there was also an equally close battle between Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch for the free pass, which got Kyle Busch back on the lead lap and back into contention even with his damaged race car. Start of stage 3, even more great racing occurred, and there was a little bit of a longer green flag run as well during stage 3. Kyle Busch was actually driving his way through the field with his damaged race car and actually got up inside the top 5 before spinning Martin Truex Jr. on accident, bringing out the caution flag. And then that caution flag really kind of shook up the whole race, and it created chaotic racing as every driver tried to find their way forward on the restarts. Caused a lot of contact. At one point there was 3-wide racing, and Kyle Busch actually got a cut tire from all that contact and spun around. And in classic Bristol fashion, the crowd let everyone know how they felt about what happened on the racetrack.
That man's had an eventful night, I'd say.
Well, look at the banking too. He can't go anywhere because he doesn't have any rubber on the wheels. The tires have come off.
You can hear the crowd cheer. Look at what's the situation here, Steve? If he can't move that car, does that pretty much take him out of the event?
And then at the end, Kurt Busch ended up holding on and winning the race. He even had a damaged race car from that first accident of the night. And a lot of different drivers led the race for numerous laps. You had drivers like Harvick and Ryan Blaney. You had Clint Bowyer, Kurt Busch lead, Chase Elliott as well. So there were 5 or 6 drivers that went up there and led, over 20 laps or so during the race. No one ever really got out front and dominated, which is why, in my book, the 2018 Bass Pro Shops NRA Night Race gets a 94 out of 100 as a rating.
Green flags in the air.
The 2017 First Data 500 provided much of the same as the previous race. There was a good mix of long runs and short runs sprinkled throughout the race, and really, really good battling even for the lead at points, which occurred over the course of this race. And beating and banging was a major theme of the race. There was a lot of points where people were, hitting each other. It was a playoff race. There were some playoff tensions as well during it, so that was really fun to see as well. But the race even ramped up more as the sun began to set, as drivers pushed for every point if they were in the playoffs. And one of the final restarts of the race saw Chase Elliott controversially send Brad Keselowski up the racetrack before he himself was taken out by Denny Hamlin a few corners later. And then the final restart featured much of that same beating and banging short track style racing, with Kyle Busch bumping his teammate Hamlin out of the lead and battling side by side with Martin Truex Jr. all the way down to the checkered flag, with Busch coming on top over a last lap pass from Denny Hamlin. But then behind the lead duo, a massive crash broke out coming to the checkered flag, which saw the track end up blocked as a result, and some pretty hard hits in that as well. And then we all know, of course, the Chase Elliott-Denny Hamlin tempers after the race, with Chase hitting Denny going back into pit road, them getting on the backstretch, confronting each other, and then the classic interviews on pit road, especially Chase's interview. But really, that doesn't get factored into how the race was. That's just icing on the cake of what was a very good race during the racing portion and not necessarily the post-race portion. This race also gets a 94 out of 100 rating.
Is green.
The 2010 Emory Healthcare 500 was, in my opinion, the best race of the 2010 season. The first 133 laps went caution-free, but the battling still happened for the lead all throughout those 133 green flag laps. Drivers like Hamlin, Newman, Stewart, and Busch were able to make their way through and battle for the lead during that 133 lap run, with Stewart and Hamlin sharing an epic duel, which spanned basically, a green flag cycle, pit stop cycle or two, all the way up until the first yellow came out in the race. I mean, those two legitimately would have kept battling if the race stayed green without that first yellow. It was truly a sight to see. And then after that, one of the favorites for the win, Denny Hamlin, blew an engine while running inside the top 5, which took him out of contention for the win. Restarts were chaotic for the rest of the race, with plenty of big moves being made trying to get track position and points, as the chase was just a couple races away. And then towards the end of the race, one of the better battles of the race was a three-way battle for the lead between Kasey Kahne, Jimmie Johnson, and Carl Edwards, where it looked like that was going to be the deciding battle for the victory. The three were running different lanes. Kasey all the way up against the wall, Jimmie about a lane or two lower, Carl Edwards all the way down along the yellow line on the bottom of the racetrack, which showed the true racing nature that the Atlanta Motor Speedway could provide, before a caution came out and the battle led to pit stops. Tony Stewart was able to take the lead on that final restart and never looked back as he took the checkered flag to get the victory. And with all the battling this race had, especially for the race lead, this race gets a 94 out of 100 rating.
Green flag is in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, guys.
The 2014 Daytona 500 can be regarded as one of the greatest Daytona 500s to ever run, and is definitely the best version of the race from the 2010s. It was originally planned to be a day race, but quickly turned to a night race as the rains came and delayed the race into the nighttime. However, when the race resumed, the drivers were all out. They were amped up, ready to go, and they were ready to battle to the front. The racing was very, very aggressive after the rain delay, but it was very clean as well, as the race went 99 laps without a caution after the race's resumption. From there, aggressive racing led to some multi-car wrecks, but also fantastic battling still at the front of the field. Underdogs like Sorensen, Castle, Stenhouse, Mears, and Dillon were factors at the front battling for top 10s. There was just something so special about the biggest race of the NASCAR season coming down to the likes of Earnhardt Jr., Gordon, Johnson, Kyle Busch, Keselowski, Hamlin, Harvick, Edwards, Kenseth, and Biffle. This cast of characters at the front for the final restart, all battling inside the top 10, top 15, truly gave this race the big feel it deserves. The biggest drivers in the sport battling for the biggest race victory of the season. In my opinion, it can't get any better than that. And on top of all of it, fan favorite Dale Earnhardt Jr. was able to block his way to a second Daytona 500 10 years after his first one. That may make me biased about it, but the 2014 Daytona 500 is truly the greatest Daytona 500 I've ever watched, as the race gets a 94 out of 100.
Coming to the green flag, the Overton's 400 underway.
In the middle of what had been a largely lackluster 2018 season was the 2018 Overton's 400 at the Chicagoland Speedway. No one thought anything of this race going into the weekend, but the fans were truly in for one special race. The entire race only featured 5 caution flags, which allowed for a lot of green flag racing and longer runs to showcase the high tire wear that Chicagoland has. There were some good battles throughout the pack in Stage 1, and this continued into Stage 2. More great battling for position, including numerous battles for the lead, had fans finally finding an intermediate race in the year 2018 enjoyable to watch. There were even a lot of pit road penalties, which saw favorites like Clint Bowyer and Eric Almirola fall out of the lead, fall to the back even laps down, and have to recover from that. And in all of it, Stage 2 was capped off with an amazing duel between SHR teammates Kurt Busch and Kevin Harvick, with Kevin Harvick coming out on top in the final corners of the stage. More great battling occurred at the beginning of Stage 3, especially for the race lead between numerous cars, not just one or two. And then, after a couple cautions, Kyle Busch appeared out of nowhere to challenge for the win. And while, if you look at the race stats, it says Kyle Busch led the final 59 laps outright, it truly does not describe what occurred in the final 20 or so laps. Kyle Larson, ripping the wall, was reeling Kyle Busch in. But a couple of run-ins with the wall appeared to ruin any chance Larson had of catching up. However, lap traffic played a hand in the ending, with Busch getting drastically held up and Larson now right on his bumper. At the white flag, Larson threw it into turns 1 and 2 for a
try job
before making contact with Busch. The rest is history, as the two provided one of the greatest NASCAR finishes of all time. For sure, the best race of 2018, the Overton's 400 at Chicagoland gets a 95 out of 100.
The bumper to the back of him!
Day and a half late, we are going green in Atlanta.
Perhaps the best race the least amount of people saw live. The 2011 Advocare 500 at Atlanta was hurricane delayed to Tuesday, but it didn't stop it from being an entertaining race. Immediately from the get-go, the battling throughout the pack occurred in this race, with battling for the lead happening more times than not. Not only were the long runs fun to watch with tire wear being high throughout the race, but restarts were also very, very aggressive as drivers battled for position. Kevin Harvick had one of the best saves ever seen, as he was able to catch his number 29 Chevrolet before he junked the field behind him. The race featured 35 different lead changes and ended on a 71-lap green flag run. And then the gravy of this race was the finish, with two legends of the Cup Series battling for the win, Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson. The two wheeled their ill-handling cars as hard as they would drive, each driver practically driving the car sideways more times than he was driving it straight. At the end of one of the most fun duels for the win, Jeff Gordon found victory lane, outlasting Johnson as they slid their way to the checkered flag. While this race is easily remembered for that final battle between Johnson and Gordon, and rightfully so, it had so much more that occurred before that battle that should also be remembered and celebrated. And for that reason, the 2011 Advocare 500 at Atlanta gets a 95 out of 100.
Boogity, boogity, boogity! Let's go racing, boys!
The 2013 Auto Club 400 shares many characteristics with the previous race. While the battle for the win was the most memorable part of the reason, and for a good reason, the rest of it was just as good and should be remembered just as much. Kyle Busch had a dominant race car, leading 5/8 of the laps run, but he had many good battles for the lead along the way, and there were also many great battles happening further back of the pack behind him. A late spin by Clint Bowyer led to a restart with 11 laps to go. Many different tire strategies saw the pack jumbled up as the green flag flew for the final time. Tony Stewart and Joey Logano had a blocking match down into turn 1, allowing Kyle Busch to hold the lead. Further back of the pack, drivers like Hamlin and Earnhardt Jr. battled through the pack with their newer tires, slicing and dicing and taking every line necessary. Meanwhile, battling at the front continued, with a great battle between Busch, Logano, and Hamlin for the race lead, with Logano coming out on top. However, Denny Hamlin was able to track him back down and battle with him on the white flag lap. The two raced very, very hard, and maybe a little bit too hard, as Joey washed up into Hamlin in turn 3, wrecking them both. Kyle Busch scooted around the outside of the mess to win the race, with Earnhardt Jr. coming from 18th to 2nd in just 11 laps. Those final 11 laps are some of the best racing a fan could ever get to end a race, which is why the 2013 Auto Club 400 gets a 95 out of 100.
The green flag is out.
The 2011 Tums Fast Relief 500 is probably the most chaotic race on this list. It seemed like every driver, including the normally clean drivers, decided to have a 5-hour energy before the race, as every driver in the field was amped up and battling hard to get every position. Contact occurred frequently and was the norm, not the exception. It had played out like a classic short track race. A bunch of shorter runs because of yellows early, shaking up the strategy and the running order along with it. However, some longer runs began around the 100 lap mark of the race, including a 98 lap green flag run. And before that 98 lap green flag run, two of the championship favorites were in danger of going a lap down. While Edwards ended up falling a lap down, Tony Stewart fought hard with the leader and ended up staying on the lead lap, which was a crucial moment not only for the end of the race, but the end of the championship fight. The race became chaotic once again with around 100 laps to go, as drivers, both in the chase and not in the chase, were driving aggressively to get to the front of the field. On one of the late yellows, Jimmy Johnson was the only driver to stay on the racetrack. Even then, his car still looked good enough to hold on for the win. That is, until Brian Vickers' case of Vickerism caused one final yellow in the race. Tony Stewart was able to pass Johnson on the high side of 3 and 4 on the final restart, taking a key victory in the battle for the championship. While the race stats will show 18 yellows, there were times where there were green flag runs during the race, but also the beating and banging everyone wants on a short track. The 2011 Tums Fast Relief 500 at Martinsville gets a 97 out of 100.
Will there be the big one? How will it affect the championship? And how many lead changes will we see today at Talladega?
The 2012 Good Sam Roadside Assistance 500 may be the last Superspeedway race of its kind. While it was a very clean race, the drivers also drove possessed throughout, making it the most aggressive plate race of 2012 and maybe the most aggressive plate race of the 2010s. Drivers seemingly found out that pushing the crap out of the car in front of them was the best way to pass with the 2012 rules package, and it worked to perfection in this race. The race featured 54 lead changes and over 13,000 green flag passes for a position, all while keeping crashes to a minimum. Throughout the first 188 of the 189 laps run, only 6 different cars were involved in incidents, with only 4 cautions coming out, 1 for a multi-car wreck early on, 2 for single-car crashes, and another for debris. Sure, there were many close calls, such as Roush's near nightmare down into turn 1, or Gordon literally drifting his car through the tri-oval, but the racing was actually very, very clean, and it looked like a majority of the field would see the checkered flag. But we all know what occurred at the end, though. A 4-wide pack, steaming for the checkered flag, looking like it could turn to one of the best finishes in NASCAR history, as underdogs were forcing their way to the front of the field. But Tony Stewart threw an awful block and turned himself into the pack, collecting practically everyone. Kenseth emerged as the winner, with very few clean cars behind him. Basically, the race was very clean for all but the final lap, and even then, it was truly only the fault of one driver. Since a Superspeedway race that aggressive and clean is basically extinct in this day and age, the 2012 Talladega Chase race gets a 98 out of 100.
The Ford 400 is underway.
The 2011 Ford 400 is truly the best race of the 2010s, both in racing quality and the championship battle that occurred during it. The battle for the championship was between Edwards and Stewart, with the points gap dramatically close for the final race. Unfortunately, early on, Kurt Busch had a major mechanical failure, with pieces of his car flying out from under the hood, one even shooting through Busch's cockpit. but another piece striking the nose of Stewart's car, damaging it and hurting overall speed and aerodynamics. The 14 crew did a great job repairing the car, and Stewart began to climb back through the field, not giving in the championship fight. One of the most dramatic moments happened on a late restart, with Stewart making a gutsy 4-wide move into turn 1 to put cars between himself and Edwards, who had been the dominant driver of the race and had led the most laps. Unfortunately, the race saw its third rain caution stop what had been the longest run of the race under the green flag. However, this gave Stewart a chance to get the lead on the restart, and he did just that, never looking back and taking the win while his championship rival came home second, tied for the championship. Stewart won via the tiebreaker in the closest championship battle in NASCAR history. While the championship bout was fantastic and provided great moments during the race, the battling on track during the race also doesn't get talked about enough, as battling occurred throughout the entirety of it. The only negative I can really give this race is that 3 rain cautions really hurt the flow of it, and it led to longer cautions, and it took away from some of the longer green flag runs of the race. So since nothing can ever be perfect, the 2011 Ford 400, my best race of the 2010s, gets a 99 out of 100. So that is, in my opinion, the 10 best NASCAR Cup Series races of the 2010s. Once again, only my opinion, not the law of the land, but I think it's interesting to share what I found during my watch through of the 2010s. And let me know, because obviously I think it's a lot, as I mentioned during the worst races video, it's a lot easier to remember the good races than the bad races. So in the bad race video, when I said, oh, tell me races you think should be considered down, in the 10 worst. But who's really going to remember the 10, who's going to remember bad races when you have good races, right? So if there are good races that you feel deserve to be in the top 10, let me know, right? Because I think it's interesting, because there were definitely races that were very, very close to being inside the top 10 that maybe if I were to watch these again, they would maybe be put inside the top 10 instead of some others, right? There were some like a 2014 Martinsville Chase race, the first 2011 Martinsville race, the 2019 Talladega Chase race, the 2019 Bristol Night race. There were a lot that were oh so close to being inside the top 10. It was actually at points hard to decide what should be inside the top 10, what shouldn't. But yeah, that's just how the rankings provide it. All the top 10 races were ranked 94 or higher. There were a lot of 93s. I think there were 4 93s or so that were just below it. So that's interesting as well. But yeah, let me know what you think, right? Because obviously there are some really good races, and I actually left off, I think, besides the 500, I left off one of the favorite seasons of the 2010s, 2014. That's the only one I put inside the top 10, while 2011 had 3, 2018 had 1, 2017 had 1, 2010 had 1, 2012 had 1. So yeah, or I guess 2018 had 2 because of Bristol as well. So yeah, that's interesting to see as well. But that's it on my 10 best NASCAR races, NASCAR Cup races of the 2010s. Thanks for watching if you got to this point. And I'll see if there's anything more I maybe want to do with this. But I think that's a good thing. The 10 worst, the 10 best, and kind of leave it at that. And maybe I'll go watch another season and do some things with that. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys for the next video.